Hi everyone, welcome to AweSum Education's video. This is the SAT Practice Test 9 from College Board, and this is the No Calculator section. Let's get started. In question 1, you have system of equations and you have to find the value of x plus y. That means plugging in doesn't really help because you have to find both x and y. The easiest way to do this is using the system of equation to cancel at least one of the variables. So I'm going to multiply this by 2. You can also multiply the second equation by -2 to get rid of x, but I'm just going to get rid of y. So if I multiply it by 2, I get 4x minus 2y equals to 16. And if I add these two equations, I get 5x equals to 20 because the y's cancel out. That means x is equal to 4. And I can actually plug it in either of these equations to get y, but it's easier to plug it in here. And the reason is, since the sum is 4, that means y has to be 0. Y cannot be any other numbers if the sum wasn't 4 when x is already 4. So x plus y is equal to 4. That means B is the answer. In question 2, you have to find which of the following is equivalent to a given set of terms. So in this case, you can also understand equivalent as simplify. So if you can do this in your head, you can of course get the answer as A. But even if you were to write it down and simplify by writing all the steps, you don't have to look at the first part. And the reason for that is if you look at the options, all three of them has 5x squared. So you can just look at the x part and get -2x and -3x, which adds up to -5x. And only option A has that. So that's the right answer. So in SAT, like, you have to think of the least amount of work you need to do to get the right answer. And this is just a simple example of doing that. In question 3, we have to find which of the following statement is true about this linear equation. We have to find whether the slope and the y-intercept are positive or negative. If you were to move this on the right hand side, then 3x becomes positive. That means the slope is positive. It's already given that the constant value is negative, so the y-intercept has to be negative. That means D is the answer. I'm going to take some time to explain question 4 because this is a very important concept and it's also a very common SAT problem. Before I even read this question, I can tell this has to do with linear equations because the options are in format of y equals to mx plus b. Another way of telling that the equation has to do with linear equations is this part right here. Anytime you have constant rate, you can assume that the equation is linear. The other thing you need to remember about linear equation is m, which is the slope, always means rate, and b, which is the y-intercept, means initial or starting value. At the information given about this roller coaster to find m and b. The roller coaster is 15 feet above the ground. That means b is 15. And the constant rate is 8 feet per second. That means m is 8. So before we confirm our answer as A, we need to make sure our units are consistent. So in the final part, which of the following equation gives height in feet of the front of the roller coaster car s seconds after it starts up the hill? That means height is in feet and the rate is in feet per second. So we don't have to change any units. That means A is our answer. In this question, we have linear function or linear equation again because we have a relationship between two variables. You can think of it as y equals to mx plus b if you're comfortable with that. And before I start doing the question, I'm going to highlight the keywords in this question. So we have C in dollars, H in hours, and we have two different people hiring the same electrician. And there's a situation where we have a 2-hour longer work So much more means we just need to find the difference. To find the difference, we only need to look at the rate. Since the electrician is using the same function to charge both of them, we can determine the difference by multiplying the rate by the longer hours worked, which is 75 times 2, and that's $150. And that's why C is the answer. What you need to understand here is that the ratio of the arc and the corresponding angle, the corresponding central angle, are always equal. So what that means is arc ADC over the corresponding central angle X is equal to the other arc ABC and the corresponding central angle, which in this case goes around here, and that's 360 minus X. So I'm going to write 360 minus X here. So let's bring it down here. We have arc ADC as 5 pi and X is 100. And we have to find arc ABC. Let's call that Y. And 360 minus 100 is 260. So if you multiply both sides by 260, we get 5 pi times 260 over 100. And this is a no calculator section, so you'll have to do it yourself without using calculator. You can get rid of this 0 and you can make this a 2. 5 times 2 is 10. And the last thing you can do is 2 times 13 is 26. So the answer is 13 pi, and that's B. The easiest way to do question 7 is to flip both sides of the equation. And to do that, I'm going to write over 1 on the right. So if I flip both sides, it becomes x over 8 equals to 1 over 160. And when I multiply both sides of the equations by 8, x becomes 8 over 160. Before you do anything else, you actually already have the answer. If you look at the options, all of these are above 1, right? But 8 over 160 cannot be above 1. That means it has to be a decimal value. That means D is the answer. For question 8, we want to find A in such a way that the equation does not have a solution. That's what it means by this part over here. No value of x satisfies the equation. Before we get to that part, let's distribute the right hand side. We have 2ax minus 15 and 3x and 5x becomes 8x. We have 15 minus 5, which is positive 10. Now if we don't want this equation to have solution, we want these part to cancel out. And if that cancels out, we get something like negative 15 equals to 10, which doesn't make sense. But the whole point of this question is to find A in such a way that the equation doesn't make sense, which is what it means by no value of x that satisfies the equation. So for that to happen, we need 2a equals to 8. That gets us A is equal to 4. So the answer is C as 4. In question 9, you have 3 different equations and you have to find the solution of the system. The solution is where all 3 of these equations meet, and that only happens at this point. Any other points are either an intercept or an intersection of only 2 of these equations. That's why the answer is B, 1. In this question, we have to find the product of A and B. Since this is SAT math, we are going to do the least amount of work necessary to find the product. What that means is we don't have to find individual values of A and B and then multiply together to find the product. We can find the product directly. It is given that the equation is true for all values of x. So what that means is the corresponding coefficients of x cubed, x squared, and x on the left hand side, if we were to distribute, should have the same values. Now we need to get the part where we get the product of A and B. And that happens in x squared, because we can notice that if we multiply these two terms, I get negative AB as coefficient. But that's not the only x squared on the left hand side. There's another way to get x squared, so we need to consider those two terms too, which gets us the coefficient of 15. So if we were to add these two coefficients, we should get the coefficient on the right hand side, which is negative 9. Now we just need to solve this equation to get the values of AB. That is equal to 15 plus 9, and that's 24. You can also solve this problem by getting coefficient for x cube and x and solving the system of equation. But I am sure you understand that it will take a lot longer than doing it this way. In question 11, we have to find all possible values of x that satisfy the equation. So we need to find all solutions that work. Usually, I don't recommend testing all the options without eliminating any of them. But since we have multiple values that are the same, it might be a good way to test answers to find the correct one. If I want to test, I'm just going to get rid of that because that will save me some time. If I start testing using 4, I have 4 over 4 minus 3 on the left, which is equal to 4, so that works. So this is not our answer. And let's try 0. If I use 0, I have 0 on the left hand side and 0 on the right hand side. That works. So B is the right answer. To solve 12, you need to make a common denominator out of these two terms, and that common denominator, of course, is 2x plus 1, and all of the options have the same denominator. So you need to multiply 2x plus 1 over 2x plus 1 for 5, and on the top you are left with 1 plus 10x plus 5, right? And that is 10x plus 6. That's why D is the answer. In question 13, you have a parabola which has a quadratic equation, and you have to find that equation based on the graph given. We have a vertex and two other points. So for this, you need to remember the vertex form of parabola, which is y equals to a x minus h square plus k, where h and k are vertex, which is 3 and 1 in this case. So anything with x minus 3 squared plus 1 will work. Seems like there are two options that matches our description. So it could be any of these depending on the value of a. To find out which one of these options are correct, I'm going to plug in 2, 5 in option C because that's slightly easier to plug in, and then see if it works out. For option C, if I use 2, 5, I have 2 as x, so 2 minus 3 is square plus 1. That definitely doesn't equal 5, so this does not work out, and the answer is A. In question 14, we have to find the shaded region represented by the inequalities given. And in all the options, we have same lines at same position. So this one is 1 because it has a positive slope, and this one is 2 because it has a negative slope. If you want, you can also change this into y equals to mx plus b to make it convenient. So 2x should be negative, and you would divide both sides by 3. So that would be negative 2x plus 6 over 3. Now that's done, we need to find the shaded region. So for 1, we have greater than. That means it has to be above 1. And for 2, we have less than. That means it has to be below 2. So above 1 and below 2. You can see that only B has that. A doesn't work because this is below 1. C doesn't work because this is above 2. And this is below 1 and above 2, so D doesn't work either. Best way to do 15 is by plugging in the values, and you just have to plug in -1 and 2 to see what happens. Let's try -1 first. So if I plug in -1, I get -1 plus 2. That becomes root of +1, and that is 1. On the right hand side, I have negative of -1, and that is also +1. So the first one works. So it's either A or B. C and D are not correct. If I plug in 2 now, I get 2 plus 2 square root, and that is 2. On the right hand side, I have -2. That doesn't work. That means the answer is B, and A doesn't work. The reason you don't want to solve this equation is because when you square both sides and get something like this, you introduce a new value in the equation. Because if you were to solve this, you get x squared minus x minus 2 equals to 0. And when you solve the quadratic equation, you get x as -1 and 2. So if you just solve this question and see -1 and 2 and plug your answer as A, that's not correct, because if you plug in 2, it doesn't work. So that's why the best way to do this question is by plugging in the answers. For question 16, you just need to remember that the volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. And if you were to visualize that, it's something like this. And our values that are given is 10, 9, and 4. So our volume is 10 times 9 times 4, which is 360. So your answer is 360. In 17, I know it's easy to find x and then plug it back in, but you don't need to do it that way because you can find 2x plus 1 directly from 4x plus 2 by dividing by 2. So 4x plus 2 equals to 4, and divide by 2 both sides. That gets you 2x plus 1 equals to 2, right? So all you had to do was make a half of 4, and that is equal to 2, which would be your answer. In question 18, you have a function f that is given in the graph, and you have to find the maximum value of function g based on this equation. So to find maximum of gx, we need maximum of fx, so we can add it to 6. If we look at the graph, the maximum value fx can get are these values, which is 2, because this is 1 and this is 2. That means the maximum value of gx is going to be 2 plus 6, and that is equal to 8. So 8 is the answer. In question 19, you have a right angled triangle PQR, and Q is at 90 degree, and it's also given that sine R is 4 over 5. So for sine, you have opposite over hypotenuse. So for sine R, opposite is over here and hypotenuse is PR. So our values are 4x and 5x. The reason I write 4x and 5x here is because we don't know the sides from the ratios. It could be 40 and 50, it could be 8 and 10. So we only know the ratios from the trigonometric values. So I'll just leave it as 4x and 5x. Now you have to find tan of P. So tan of P is opposite over adjacent. So that would be QR over PQ. For SAT math, you should remember the basic triplets for the right angle triangle, which is 3, 4, 5. So if you have 5 as the hypotenuse, then you can have 4 and 3 as the other sides. So in this triangle, it will be 3x. You can also find this by doing the Pythagorean triplets, which is c squared equals to a squared plus b squared. But I would recommend knowing this triplet 3, 4, 5, which is very common in SAT math, which will help you solve problems like this. So with that 3x at QR, now we can do 3x over 4x here. So tan P is 3 over 4. So the answer is 3 over 4. In question 20, we have a linear function f given in the graph, and we have another linear function z. It is not shown, but it is perpendicular to the graph of f, and it also passes through 1, 3. So it will look like something like this. This is 1, 3, and it is perpendicular here. And g of 0 is this y value, which is just b or y-intercept of gx. So we need to find b of gx. First, we need to find the slope of fx. We can do that by rise over run, which is 2 over 1. And we know it is negative because it has a negative slope. You can also say it's a negative slope by looking at this angle, which is obtuse, and that's greater than 90 degree. So the slope of fx is negative 2. That means slope of gx is going to be opposite reciprocal because it's perpendicular to fx. So slope of gx is 1 over 2. Now we have the equation of gx in the form of mx plus b. We have the slope, but we don't have the intercept. But we know it passes through 1, 3. That means 1, 3 satisfies this equation. So let's plug 1, 3 here. 3 is y, and half of 1 plus b. So b is equal to 3 minus half, which is 2.5. Or in fraction form, it's 5 over 2. So z of 0 is this value right here. And the answer is 2.5 or 5/2. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you.